8111, and you can get the app on your iPhone or your Android. But you want to stay tuned because the National Pulse is next, so you won't want to miss that. And we will be back here tomorrow.
Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. Well, it was over a month ago that we first told you about the Transition Integrity Project. We've reported exclusively on that project to steal the election after November the 3rd, be it the links between the organization and the Chinese Communist Party or with George Soros and his Open Society Institute. We brought you exclusive reporting in terms of the organization's report, their modus operandi, and how they intend to drag the election out for over a month. Today, we bring you the smoking gun. The Transition Integrity Project took a provisional website live last week. It was only up for about 4 hours or 5 hours and has since disappeared. But it gave us the impetus to go after a group listed at the bottom of the website. The Transition Integrity Project is funded by the United to Protect Democracy organization, a 501c3 tax-exempt entity set up in the wake of President Trump's victory in 2016. Stay with me on this. United to Protect Democracy works hand in hand. They share the same staff and website with the Protect Democracy Project. So from here on out, I'll be referring to both of these groups under that moniker, the Protect Democracy Project. So the Protect Democracy Project is behind the Transition Integrity Project. So what, right? Most organizations in Washington, D.C. have a setup like that. The National Pulse is a project of the American Principles Project, for instance. Lots of projects here in D.C. But it's not the setup of that organization that matters. Nobody's alleging any wrongdoing in that circumstance. Instead, it goes back to precisely what President Trump has alleged for years, and what we've all secretly known. The efforts to nullify President Trump's victory in 2016 goes right back to one man, Barack Hussein Obama. The former president of the United States has no fewer than 22 of his former staff, some of them very senior, working on the Protect Democracy Project and its broader organization. This is nothing short of a full-on national scandal involving a peaceful transition to power for the Trump administration that never happened. Now Democrats are doing what they do best, projecting. The Transition Integrity Project alleges that President Trump will refuse to leave power if he loses in November. A risible claim, given how much the president talks about the comfort of his own life before running for office. Honestly, I'm sure there's part of him that would like the rest. But you tell me who really refused to leave power. Was it maybe the thousands of government employees who set their faces like flint to thwarting the Trump administration, which represented, by the way, the express will of the American people? Was it not the Lieutenant Colonel Vindmans, whose vice gripped power only to attempt to depose a sitting president because his foreign policy concerns were different to Vindman's? Is it not the Obama-era lawyers like Ian Bassin who leads the Protect Democracy Project, which floods the administration with lawsuits and Freedom of Information Act requests with the express purpose of hampering the very same government and nation they once pledged to serve? Yes, it's all those people and way beyond, enemies of the American people. So who's Ian Bassin, you ask? Oh, he was just Obama's associate White House counsel, that's all, a leading Obama-era lawyer funding the Transition Integrity Project, and its open calls for street fight. You know, Bassin is no straight-up legal mind either. He has a long history on the far left of politics, including and not limited to a group called Avaz, which operates internationally as much as it operates in the United States. Avaz is notoriously anti-Israel and backs some of the hardest left projects out there. Bassin served as their campaign director and was also an Obama campaign flunky before being elevated to the White House. Bassin has also been part of a group called the Truman National Security Project, featuring a coterie of globalists more intent on shipping jobs to China than representing America's interests. And how could it be anything else? The Truman National Security Project has featured none other than Hunter Biden on its board. That's the son of the Democratic Party candidate for president, in case you forgot. Where is Hunter, by the way? Your guess is as good as mine. And all of this is just scratching the surface as far as these networks are concerned. But I do quickly want to remind you of the words of a Transition Integrity Project member, former Michigan governor turned CNN commentator Jennifer Granholm, who gave the game away on CNN even before we covered it on the National Pulse. It's a testament to how few people watch CNN that nobody picked this up at the time. Let's roll the clip.
What happens if the vote is contested, or if President Trump refuses to concede, even if he loses? A bipartisan group of experts, bipartisan, has been meeting to consider those very scenarios. And two of them will join me now, CNN political commentator and former Michigan Democratic Governor Jennifer Granholm. Also with us in a moment, I think, when we get the technology issues worked out, Bill Kristol. He's director of the conservative group Defending Democracy, and we're going to bring him on in a moment. I just want to ask you a question, Governor, is how seriously is this group taking the possibility of this president either attempting to delay the election or otherwise interfere with it or not accept the results? And I'll just remind people at home, this is not a Democratic plot here. This is a bipartisan group that is investigating these scenarios. How seriously are you taking those scenarios?
Well, that's the whole point of it's called the Transition Integrity Project. There were 100 participants, and as you say, it was bipartisan. It's sponsored by a nonpartisan entity called Protect Democracy. And honestly, Jim, it was a real eye-opener to many of us. It was pretty scary. I mean, the point of the exercises was not to scare people, but to really figure out what to do now to avoid a crisis in the future, on Election Day, and after Election Day, too, because you're not going to necessarily get the results on election night.
Non-partisan, non-frickin' partisan is what she said. The Obama White House, Hunter Biden, George Soros, the Chinese Communist Party, and more, non-partisan. Ladies and gentlemen, this is gaslight to the most extraordinary levels, and U.S. news organizations are swallowing the line, repeating it all outright. No one gets challenged. No one has to explain. Governor Granholm didn't even consider herself compromised out of dealing with the issue on CNN as a CNN commentator, despite being a member of the Transition Integrity Project. She's just allowed to wax lyrical because they're all in bed together. As Congressman Matt Gaetz writes in his new book, Firebrand, the media is the PR arm of the Democratic Party of America. But now you know it goes right to the top, right to Barack Obama. And frankly, given what we now know, I'd be surprised if he wasn't directing the whole thing behind the scenes. The nullification project is the Obama restoration project. It is inherently anti-American, anti-America, and determined to bring this country to civil war. This is the National Pulse. When we come back, we'll talk to Natalie Winters, who's been doing a lot of the hard digging behind this story. We'll go right now to break. We'll be back with more National Pulse, Natalie Winters, Raheem Kassam in just a second. Welcome back to the National Pulse. Well, another day, another President Trump tweet of National Pulse articles. I wonder if we can get it up on the screen there. I want to say thank you to the President for sharing that, or maybe we can get it up in the files. There you go. President Trump sharing my story from this weekend about the ABC Ipsos poll, and we'll talk about that in the last segment of this show today. I'm going to bring on Natalie Winters in just a second to walk us through some of the exclusive reporting we've been doing into the Transition Integrity Project. Now we know who's behind all of this, but first, a couple of happenings for you guys and gals out there. We have our second National Pulse Town Hall this evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Natalie Winters and I will be hosting that. That's basically for our subscribers, our members for the National Pulse website. So if you want to be part of that team, a team we're thinking about calling, I'll break the news here, we're thinking about calling the Nationalist. We have several hundred members already. You can sign up at thenationalpulse.com/support, and we're grateful for everybody who's a part of that team, keeping our reporting going. I want to put this thing on the screen really quickly. It's the New York Magazine article that just kind of broke this morning, and I just saw it before we went live with the show today. New York Magazine has just this incredible call to civil war almost. There's an article by Jonathan Chait, and the full title of it is "Lock Him Up?" For the Republic to survive Trump's presidency, he must be tried for his crimes, even if that sparks a constitutional crisis of its own. These people, as I said before the break, are intent on plunging the United States into civil war, and you can catch all the information that you need to know about that over at the National Pulse on our social media pages, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Parler. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. If you're watching it right now and you're not subscribed, hit that button. You'll never miss a show. Natalie Winters. Listen, we worked all weekend on this story, even before the weekend on this story, digging up the details about who's behind the Transition Integrity Project. Now, we thought a month ago when we first reported all of this, okay, we had the Berggruen Institute, we had the Open Society Institutes, we had George Soros, Rosa Brooks. Then came the emails, right? Then it was the John Podesta emails, the Jake Sullivan emails. That's Biden's own team working with Rosa Brooks, who runs the Transition Integrity Project. And then TIP themselves popped up a little website last week. Tell us about it.
Yeah, frankly, any of those links you just mentioned would have been kill shots to the Transition Integrity Project's facade of neutrality and bipartisanship. But the story that we have up today really is the final nail in the coffin in terms of Transition Integrity Project being able to represent themselves as a bipartisan, as a free and fair election advocate, when in reality, they're Obama through and through. The overwhelming majority of their staff, not just supporters of Obama, but individuals who have literally worked in his White House. They've been around since day one of the Trump presidency. We've always said on the site that the Transition Integrity Project is very similar to impeachment, to the Russia collusion hoax. And the reason why it's so similar is because it's the same individuals involved, it's the same actors, it's the same thought process.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of the overlap. I think it was a day apart that the Moscow Project was launched, and then this group, Protect Democracy, the Protect Democracy Project, was launched. It's all very clumsy, by the way, but the point is, no matter how clumsy it was, nobody in the media seems to have picked up on this. Now, I get that the national media and the establishment media wouldn't be reporting on their buddies. I mean, these people are married to a lot of the reporters that work at the Washington Post or work at the New York Times. So their spouses aren't going to rat them out. I'm wondering where the conservative media's bit throughout all this.
For all we know, as we've exposed the Transition Integrity Project's nearly 22-page report detailing their strategy, detailing how they call for a street fight, there's a lot of media professionals, a lot of media consultants who are affiliated with the group. So for all you know, Jake Tapper, these CNN bigwigs, these media mavens that you see every night, for all you know, they're participating in the Transition Integrity Project. And I certainly wouldn't leave it up to the Transition Integrity Project to tell you that they're participating in their simulations, in their war games, given it took them how many months to say that they're funded entirely by a group that has extensive links to the Obama administration.
We'll get into Ian Bassin, heavily remunerated Ian Bassin, by the way.
Very heavily.
He's paying himself an awful lot of money to protect democracy through these groups, right? So we'll get into that in a minute. But it sounded to me there like you had another scoop coming down the pipeline about a PR agency or something.
Exactly. Their website that was up for just about 4 hours, as you said. Now, if you go to this site, there's a 404 error. But the company that they hired to do PR for them has extensive links to none other than Kamala Harris, the principal at the firm, actually was a senior advisor for her presidential bid, and the company itself has been retained by the Kamala Harris presidential campaign to do work for them. But it's bipartisan.
It's non-partisan, remember. It's all non-partisan. We'll be back with more National Pulse and more details. Natalie Winters, Raheem Kassam, just a second. Welcome back to the National Pulse. I see in the live chat we've got loads of people in here today. I'm very grateful for everyone in there. Make sure you are sharing this both live and after the show. If you're watching this in clips afterwards, it's your duty to get this information out there. It's the type of information you won't find anywhere else. I think, and I hope, that's why President Trump keeps retweeting the National Pulse. We're not one of these organizations that's existed for decades upon decades with a massive board of bigwigs from the conservative Inc. movement out there. We are new. We are beholden to ourselves, or rather beholden to you, ladies and gentlemen, out there, and we really truly consider ourselves independent-minded. We don't hide the fact that we have conservative opinions and come from a conservative perspective. We also don't hide our views on anything as a result. I'm very grateful for all of you out there that allow us to do that and watch us while we do it. I like to think we break real news here on the show and on the website, Natalie, and you certainly break a lot of news. We're going to get to CGTN later on in the show. Let's talk about Ian Bassin. Because Ian Bassin, I bet you, is somebody that nobody's heard of. He's somebody I'd never heard of. He's somebody I'd never seen pictures of before. I wonder if we can even get that picture of Ian Bassin from the Daily Mail up on the screen in this segment also, so people can really remember that face, that soy boy face that they all seem to have, right? But Ian Bassin is a particularly dangerous individual. He's dangerous because he thinks it is upon him to effectively lead the United States into a coup against a duly elected president. He thinks it's upon him to take hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary from whoever his donors might be, whether they're small donors or big donors, whatever they are. He takes nearly $300,000 a year to protect democracy. Who made this guy king?
Exactly. He has an extreme savior complex. Apparently, he needs to protect the election from the millions of deplorables who seem to just want to elect President Trump for a second term. But it's not surprising, because not only did he work in the Obama White House from 2009 to 2011, he's been involved with the whole Obama camp since 2008, working on the campaign as a director for the campaign's Florida policy.
Tell us more.
So basically he, like I said, worked in the White House, really led the White House counsel office. And through that experience, he believes that he garnered experience on the FOIA processes, on different laws and legislation, which he says aren't necessarily codified. It's more just kind of, you take your word for it, how procedurally stuff is supposed to go in the White House. So he's concerned that because this isn't explicit law, that the Trump administration is keen on exploiting these certain loopholes. But again, this narrative that President Trump is either A, not going to concede the election, or B, his officials and appointees don't respect the rule of law, don't respect American law, is really unfounded. And in fact, you see the same people who are perpetuating this narrative, like Ian Bassin, are the ones who are undermining and eroding American democracy, insisting that election night doesn't mean anything and that mail-in ballots could trickle in a few days, even weeks later.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an incredibly important point, is that the truth of the matter is it's the Ian Bassin and the Protect Democracy Project people who are the ones who are effectively attacking norms. They're attacking constitutional norms. They're attacking election night norms. They're attacking transition norms. In fact, they never allowed a transition to happen last time. That's what we need to internalize and need to accept that, all right, look, I'm not a whiner. So yes, it was probably our fault side that we didn't recognize that we had to clean house quickly. And I know the president appreciates that, and you can see that the president appreciates that, because he recently appointed a new Office of Personnel Management person to lead that part of the organization. As people know, personnel is policy. And that's why policies have been thwarted time and time again. But Ian Bassin is particularly of interest to me. And I want to see if we can get that picture of Ian Bassin up on the screen. Ian Bassin is of particular interest to me because he comes from the Avaz network, the very, very hard left organization that kind of petitions and street marches and street protests and all of this. Sound familiar to you? So Bassin's from the Avaz network. He also worked at this Truman National Security Project. Natalie, we went through the Truman National Security Project, just glanced at it. I can't tell the audience just how much research we do, because the media would love nothing more than to catch the National Pulse out with a T in the wrong place or a picture in the wrong place or whatever it is. So the Truman National Security Project, on the board of the Truman National Security Project has been Jake Sullivan, senior Biden policy advisor, and Hunter Biden, senior Biden child.
And Joe Biden himself has even spoken at the Truman National Security Project. And it's also interesting when you look at Ian Bassin, because it's not just that he hates President Trump. It's frankly that he detests his supporters as well. I've scrubbed his social media. There's a host of anti-Trump comments. I pride myself on doing a ton of research. The amount of anti-Trump tweets he had, I couldn't even scroll through it without my computer's fan turning on to the point where my computer almost froze and broke down. But some of the highlights, or really frankly lowlights, include him comparing supporters of President Trump to neo-Nazis. And even Mr. Bassin, who prides himself on defending democracy, insisted on July 11th that the government, the federal government, should, number 5 in his list of demands, should, quote, remove Trump from office, end quote, completely arbitrarily, no grounds to do so, but just because he does not like President Trump. And that's all too similar to what we saw with the impeachment inquiry.
Sounds like he knows more about Nazis than actually he might be willing to let on. I mean, that is straight out of the fascist playbook.
Exactly.
You know, unceremoniously removing a sitting, duly elected president of the United States because you don't like him. The same thing they tried with the impeachment. You mentioned something in the break as well that I think is worth saying here about the fact that, you know, they have this protect democracy project, protect democracy. The US is not a democracy. A democracy is the mechanism by which you vote, not the system of government that the US has.
Exactly. We're a constitutional republic, but frankly, the America that they want is a highly democratic one, is one in which the Electoral College doesn't exist. The Transition Integrity Project admits that in the first footnote on their 22-page report, talking about how they're keen on abolishing the Electoral College, and that's not necessarily a new phenomenon. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and a host of other prominent Democrats, both mainstream and fringe,
It's an attack on the norms.
Yeah, have been advocating to remove that, which is the only way that we can ensure that all Americans, both in the, quote, flyover states and to some extent the coastal states, still have a say.
Remember, next time you see somebody accusing the president or the president's supporters of attacking the norms, just ask them who wants to do away with parts of the Constitution. And when we come back, I've been reading some of their source material, and I'm going to tell you exactly what their next play is. It is by the grace of God that I'm British, and I know exactly what's coming down the pipeline, because they want to do what England did a long time ago. We'll be right back. Remember this? A Tyranny, Perpetual and Universal, the essay by Michael Anton. We had him on the show, was it last week or the week before last, where he walked us through a lot of this stuff as well. Whether you call it the deep state, or the in-your-face state, or the administrative state, whatever it is, we're exposing them one by one, brick by brick, right here on the National Pulse, on the nationalpulse.com. And if you want to support our work, just add a /support onto the end of that URL, the nationalpulse.com /support. Or if you have a look at Natalie Winter's laptop there, let's get a wide shot. Have a look at Natalie Winter's laptop, fundrealnews.com. You can also go to that domain and support our work. And we're really grateful for it because the tens of millions of dollars worth of organizations that exist here in Washington, D.C. that operate under a conservative umbrella, they haven't reported on any of this. They haven't put out reports and white papers and briefing documents or news articles or opinion columns. No, they've been sitting quite pretty for the last 4 years, allowing the President of the United States to carry them on his back alone, almost completely alone, over this first term. We think a little bit differently here at the National Pulse. We think that we actually want to do real journalism and really support the institutions that this country is founded upon. And that brings me to another point. Now, I've been reading some of the source materials that popped up on that brief Transition Integrity Project website over last week. One of them is a book. It's called Ballot Battles. You can get it online if you wish. It's by Professor Edward Foley. I noticed in the prologue to Ballot Battles, as I was reading it this weekend, that he explicitly intimates that the problem America has is that it doesn't have a non-partisan way, there's that word again, of solving election disputes. So it took me back to 1770 in the book, into the Grenville Act, the Parliamentary Act in the United Kingdom by the Prime Minister of the time, where he looked to rectify this. He put together what is effectively an Electoral Commission. It was made up of a handful of members of Parliament back then, and it was their job to scrutinize where there were problems in the electoral process. If there was a dispute in a particular district, if there were votes that weren't being counted, etc., etc. After that, it went from being a group of people in Parliament, the case was made that because they were still party political, the power should be taken away from them completely and given effectively to bureaucrats. Well, those bureaucrats now exist in the United Kingdom in the form of the Electoral Commission. In France, they have a constitutional council, and Foley's book mentions both of these things in the prologue. What I'm trying to tell you, America, is that these Democrats and their fellow travelers in academia are trying to bring European-style democracy to these shores. We already see European-style socialism, but what they want is an election system that mirrors England and France as well. And they're slightly different too. They want to take what they call the best from both. The best just happen to be in the left's favor. Effectively is a tyranny of the majority approach. It gets rid of the Electoral College. It establishes a bureaucracy. And let me tell you why that bureaucracy is so bad. Much like all bureaucracies, it's inherently corruptible. It doesn't really answer to anyone. But during the Brexit vote, and immediately after, we saw a massive push by Britain's Electoral Commission to try and nullify what happened there on June the 23rd, 2016. I remember I was there that day. I was there the weeks beforehand. I helped in the campaign, and I helped out afterwards as well, looking into the Electoral Commission. All of them globalists. All of them wanted to stop Brexit. You want to hand over the power, the reins of who weighs in when there's a dispute in an election to unelected bureaucrats, and you want to take it away from the only people who the people can recall, their representatives, who they elect. That is a step closer and closer and closer to tyranny through the administrative state. France has very much a similar situation. They have this constitutional council. But this constitutional council in France has never had to weigh in to a presidential election that was disputed like this, like they're saying the one in the United States is going to be on November the 4th, right up until January 19th. No, the Constitutional Council of France has never been called in for that. So there is no actual precedent for those systems being better. All the left cares about is that notionally they work better for the left. I want you to look out very closely for this narrative, because it was in 1876 in the United States that there was an Electoral Commission established, a temporary one, to deal with that Rutherford B. Hayes election. And they're going to want to do it again this year. And this time they don't want it to be temporary. This time they want it to be permanent. This time they want to rig the system for good. I want to turn back now to Natalie Winters. Natalie, sorry about that extended extemporaneous monologue there about the Electoral Commission. But let's just wrap on some of this stuff, on Ian Bassin and who are the other people that are involved in this parent group of the Transition Integrity Project.
Exactly. As we've been saying a lot now, the phrase bipartisan, nonpartisan really is this establishment, this Obama establishment's Morse code of saying we don't like Donald Trump. Everyone who's involved is a never Trumper if they are Republican. For example, Mona Charen, who was notoriously booed off of the CPAC stage for attacking President Trump, is on the advisory board of Protect Democracy Project. And even Evan McMullen, or as you like to say, McMuffin, who's a huge critic of President Trump and loves
huge critic, he ran against him.
Exactly.
They tried to steal the election by running McMuffin in Utah.
Yes, and he got, I believe it was around 20% of the vote nationally.
Nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Nonpartisan.
Exactly. And again, you look Bill Kristol, a host of people who've been out to get President Trump from the start. So they might be Republican, but they're pure Republican in name only.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. We're going to come back to you in just a moment to talk about the latest reporting from China Global Television News, CGTN, the arm of CCTV, the Chinese state media. I want you all in the break watching this right now to head on over to the National Pulse. The story is entitled thusly, called Exclusive. Obama lawyers fund Transition Integrity Group, which claims to be nonpartisan, tied to Hunter Biden. Need you to get that out to as many people as possible today. This is the smoking gun. Okay? This goes right to the top. This goes right to Barack Obama. And he needs to answer questions as to whether he's involved or not. This is the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, and we'll be right back. over the course of this show alone, we've had William J. joining us as a National Pulse member, one of our new nationalists on the site. As a lifetime member, it's a very new way to join up. It's a very limited offer because it's heavily discounted. You're going to pay for lifetime membership to the nationalpulse.com/support. So welcome to William J. And the lifetime members get a personal phone call from me, as well as a lifetime membership card and all the other benefits that you can possibly get. We have a town hall tonight at 6 p.m. As if I haven't broadcasted enough today. You'll get more me later on today if you're a member at the National Pulse. Natalie, there's so much more to go through. You mentioned Mona Charen, you mentioned Evan McMuffin. All of these people, I had to mention to the audience there about the membership, because I'm just so grateful for everybody who comes in and decides that they look at our work and they go, wow, this is actually great stuff, and they're doing a great job, which I often look at you and just don't think that, so... You're just sitting there. Did he just say that? No, this is an incredible story that we have up, and a lot of people in the live chat are asking. It's Ian Bassin, Bassin, Ian Bassin, because he's not a well-known figure, right? And because people have no reason to know. But you said something in the break as well that was really important. If Trump officials are included in anything, then President Trump has to answer to it immediately, right? But there's 22 Obama officials. Just you say it. You said it in the break. It's your point.
Well, exactly. For years, we've seen the mainstream media, we've seen Democrats try to tie anything, whether it's a protest, an act of violence, even a mass shooting, to President Trump, because the individual who perpetrated the act once 2 years ago liked a random post by President Trump, so therefore they connect that he supported the president. Here we have explicit links to the Obama administration. And are you telling me that you think CNN or Jake Tapper is going to call President Obama, they're going to have an interview and really press him on why are you allowing your former high-ranking officials, your appointees, to effectively undermine the 2020 election? No.
Yeah. The other thing I was really interested in, I know we're going to wrap on this subject now. So there was the Moscow Project, which was sort of founded around the same time as this group. I'm sure linked, and we'll get to that in time. It was the Daily Mail's reporting on this that really got me, right? So Francesca Chambers at the Daily Mail, now a member of the board at the White House Correspondents Association. We know all about that organization and its links to the Chinese Communist Party.
Exactly.
But she wrote an article, and it said this: if I wrote something like this, I would have my journalist union card ripped away from me. I'm not even kidding. I have one. I'm a member of the oldest journalist union in the United Kingdom, by the way. But I'm, as far as the left is concerned, I'm fake news. But here's the thing. This is what they write, okay? This is in the Daily Mail copy. The White House has not suggested that it intends to override the judicial branch despite Trump's smackdown of a so-called judge who ruled against him. But should it move in that direction, United to Protect Democracy will be ready. That's a press release, a badly written press release, from Ian Bassin, that the Daily Mail just runs as copy. I mean, they don't even check these things. Extraordinary stuff, and so much more to go through on all of this as well.
It's civil warmongering, essentially. It's fear-mongering to an unprecedented level in which the Trump administration has demonstrated literally no propensity or really ability to even participate in the actions they've outlined. In contrast, when you have 22 Obama officials on staff, essentially at the Transition Integrity Project, and they're doing their war games, you know that the tactics that they're deploying, that's what the Biden campaign is actually going to do, since there is such a strong revolving door between the Transition Integrity Project and the Biden campaign.
Wait, so on the one hand, the Trump administration is useless and they're terribly slow, and the pandemic is a result of their slowness to act and incompetency. On the other hand, the most evil, nefarious, calculating overthrowers of democracy, dangerous and should be imprisoned. How are they both so competent and incompetent at the same time?
Exactly. How is there so many materials that need to be FOIA'd if they're not doing anything? If there's some, administration that can't get anything done, although don't get me wrong, a lot of times their legislation gets held up because, unfortunately, the Republicans that we have in Congress don't always like to support the president, but it goes back. Exactly.
Somebody in the live chat as well just said civil warmongering. Natalie nailed it. I think that's got to be the next headline. Civil warmongering. All right. Speaking of warmongering, let's move on to the China Global Television Network. I think I said news before, right?
Yes.
Tell us about CGTN's latest.
Sure. Well, they've appropriated the left's battle cry of defunding the police to now defunding the military, as in the United States military. And the rationale behind this absurd call, again, coming from a country that we're effectively in a Cold War with, is that the United States military produces too much pollution, which is, again, extremely hypocritical coming from the country that is the #1 polluter of both land, air, and sea, but also, frankly, Chinese Communist Party run outlet doesn't need to be telling the United States military what they need to be doing with their funding.
So defund the military, birds of a feather flock together, I suppose. CGTN, I noticed as well, put up an article quoting me this morning. I don't know if you've seen that one yet.
I have not.
But I've made it. I have formally made it.
I'm envious.
Into CGTN. Just tell us, is that the works on that story?
That's essentially it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to move on to here keys before we go to a break. So President Trump tweeted this, I guess early this afternoon, our story from this weekend about the polling, the ABC polling. And the reason the ABC polling is so important is that I think in 2016, a lot of people had this feeling that the polls were fake. It didn't line up to what they were seeing out on the streets. It didn't line up and match up with what we were seeing in rallies. It certainly didn't line up, obviously, on election night, the way the pollsters thought about it anyway. And then the pollsters all came back and they said, we've rejigged our methodologies, we've fixed everything. Look, we got 2018 in the midterms, better. But now we're starting to see these fake news, what I call the fake polls, coming back into play here. And we hadn't seen all that many of them, so I kind of gave them a wide berth. Or are we really going to get that many of these fake polls? The answer, I guess, is yes. And the president thought it enough to tweet my explanation of it. The story is called ABC's Trump in Trouble poll surveyed just 533 not likely voters, asked over 20% more Biden supporters than conservatives. So have a look at that article if you can in the break right now that we're going to. And then I'm going to come back and discuss it in detail. I'm going to walk you through exactly how these fake polls work, exactly how their methodologies work, exactly what I'm looking for, so that the next time you see one of these, you know how to do it for yourself, and you can spread the word out there yourselves about these fake polls. I'm Raheem Kassam with Natalie Winters here, broadcasting live from Washington, D.C., the National Pulse, thenationalpulse.com. We'll be right back in just a second. Well, sometimes when we look at the polling, especially DC insiders, which I suppose, as much as I hate to be one, I guess I am, live here, work here, certainly drink here. What we find is that we know what to look for and we know how to identify these things, and we often forget that there are people out there who don't do this on a day-to-day basis. And so I'm going to give you a masterclass right now. Forgive me for the people who already do know this stuff. There are plenty of people out there that don't, but I'm going to give you a quick masterclass on looking at polling. Now, of course, all organizations, all news organizations, campaign organizations, advocacy groups, political campaigns, they'll all do polling and they'll all release polling, and they want to get polling out there with the headlines they want on it. Biden ahead by this, or X amount of Americans want that. And effectively, polling is used not to reflect public opinion, but it is to master public opinion. It is to tell you what you should want because 70% of your countrymen think the same, or 80% of people in your demographic think a certain way. So it's a way of cajoling you into believing something. That's what polling is now, and Christopher Hitchens actually had some magnificent quotes about it when he was alive, writing in Harper's Magazine. He had a particular disdain for polling, and if you go away after this show and search on YouTube, you can see some very funny clips of him talking about how the polling industry really took root, and how the CNNs of the world, he, I think, even mentioned CNN, how the CNNs of the world just grab onto polling and run stories about polling for days on end, as if it's news. And it's not really news, it's a way to get you to think something, or it's a way to get us, the insiders, to confirm our own biases. So the Ipsos ABC poll, which I know President Trump retweeted this morning, we can get that graphic back up on screen here for you. And we're very grateful, of course, for every interaction the president takes to help the national pulse grow. Certainly a lot of traffic comes to the site whenever he does that. But he saw fit to share this with a little comment there as well, you can see. He wasn't just tweeting out an article. Clearly he had gone in and looked at it. It was about the ABC Ipsos poll. And the ABC Ipsos poll ostensibly showed that the American public really doesn't like the way Trump has handled the coronavirus pandemic, and really didn't like the alleged words that President Trump is said to have uttered about the American military. Now, we know that last story is completely fake and faked by The Atlantic magazine, an organization that is also intrinsically linked with the Transition Integrity Project. But it was more than that that stuck out for me. What you do when these polls come out is somewhere in the body of the article. It might be nearish the top. Usually it's buried down at the bottom in a different font, maybe in italic. It'll say, read the full PDF, read the full results, read the crosstab. The crosstabs are the data. Not in the rawest form. They don't provide them in the Excel spreadsheets most of the time, but they're sort of broken out into sheets, put into a PDF format for the nerds like me to understand. So you load up the PDF, and you can immediately look for how many respondents were there to this poll. A reliable poll in my book, in my opinion, and I've done this for a very long time, both in the news world and remember from my campaign days back with the UK Independence Party and on the Brexit campaign. In my book, in the United States, to do a national poll, you really need 2,000, 2,500 as your minimum number of respondents. This ABC Ipsos poll, national poll, asked 533 people what they thought. And that's not all. When you go into how they divvied up the different categories, they're supposed to choose a representative sample of people in different groups, people in different socioeconomic groups, people in different ethnic minority groups, and people with different voting preferences. But the poll quizzed 31% Democrats, 38% independents, and just 25% Republicans. In other words, there's an over 20% inbuilt bias against Republicans in the poll. And that's not all. Ipsos actually originally refused on its website to say where its party identification numbers, what they were. They said where they were from. So I went and followed the trail to get where they were from. It was from an old poll. They said they were using old Washington Post ABC polling. So I went to that methodology. And in that methodology, They asked 522 Biden supporters and 399 Trump supporters. That's a 27% inbuilt bias for Joe Biden in this ABC and Ipsos poll. What I'm trying to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that Christopher Hitchens was absolutely right when he wrote that opinion polling was born out of struggle not to discover the public mind, but to master it. And he continued, polls are only deployed when they might prove useful, that is, helpful to the powers that be in their question to maintain their position and influence. Indeed, the polling industry is a powerful ally of depoliticization and its counterpart, which is consensus. There's a quick masterclass for you there in polling and how polling works and what you guys should be looking for. That is just the basic. You can get into the margin of errors. I really rarely ever like a poll that is above a 2.5 to 3% margin of error. This one, I believe, had something like a 4.7% margin of error, which is just way too much. The other part of it is you look for whether they spoke to registered or likely voters. And again, for this Ipsos ABC polling, they did no such thing. They spoke to just general population. That does not give you an insight into the American voting public. It certainly doesn't give you an insight into how a national election is going to shape up. So I say to Ipsos and ABC, shape up. You need to get better at these things or you're going to keep getting called out. And I'm hopeful that the President of the United States will keep sharing this information. Well, we have some great shows lined up for you this week. It's only Monday. Think about how much we've already gone through today. It's only Monday, and we have just an amazing lineup over the course of the week. Matt Gaetz will be joining us later on this week, Congressman Gaetz, to discuss his new book, Firebrand, which he gave us an exclusive excerpt, which ran on the National Pulse website this weekend. You can go back and take a look at it. It's all about the enemies of the people in the form of the national media. I want you to stick around today here on America's Voice. If you're watching anywhere on YouTube or whatever, you can download the Pluto app, download the all-new America's Voice app, and you can watch all day long on your Apple TV, on your Roku, and so on and so forth. We'll be doing a live town hall in just 2 hours at 6 p.m. over at the National Pulse offices on Capitol Hill. For the time being, I'm Raheem Kassam with Natalie Winters here in studio. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow, 3 p.m.
This evening at the Compton terminal of the Blue Line, the MTA Blue Line, there was 2 deputies who were ambushed by a gunman in a cowardly fashion.
Violence erupts over the weekend as 2 police officers fight for their lives. This after being ambushed and shot in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, wildfires continue to ravage the West Coast, sending smoke billowing across the country. President Trump visits the area later today. And finally, New Orleans preps to test its levees for the first time since Hurricane Katrina as Hurricane Sally now inches towards that city. All that and so much more on this edition of News On. Happy Monday to you and welcome to News On. I'm Miranda Kahn. Thank you so much for joining us. A massive manhunt is underway after a violent ambush in Los Angeles that sent 2 deputies to the hospital. The man accused of shooting the 2 LA County Sheriff's deputies remains on the run. Meanwhile, we're learning more information about the deputies fighting for their lives. On Saturday night, 2 LA County Sheriff's Department deputies were shot and critically injured.
The 2 deputies were doing their job, minding their own business, watching out for the safety of the people on the train, and seeing someone just walk up and just start shooting on them. It pisses me off. It dismays me at the same time.
Authorities call the attack an ambush.
The suspect approached them from behind as the deputies were facing southbound in their patrol vehicle. Suspect came from the north. He walked along the passenger side of the car. He acted as if he was going to walk past the car, and then he made a left turn.